Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I also broadly welcome the bill and add to the Secretary of State's list of people that she was praising the members of the DCMS Select Committee, of which I was a member until the end of last year. And I was glad to see several members of that committee in the House today for the second reading. Can I also say it's a pleasure to speak directly after my honourable friend, I think I can call her that after all these years, and commend her also for her work on this area, but also for her terrific speech that she's just delivered to the House. I found myself agreeing, I think, with pretty much everything that she said, and I know we're in favour of replays, but perhaps it would be wise of me not to repeat everything that she said, and I'll try not to do that in my speech, but I commend her very much for what she had to say. And there are still some who question whether or not Parliament should be regulating in this area at all. Should we be legislating to regulate football? After all, we don't do that in every sport, although as the Honourable Member for Worcester pointed out, perhaps in the case of rugby union, there's a strong case to do so after what happened to his local club and to other clubs last year in the English Premiership in rugby. But in reality, Parliament has got quite a long record, actually, of legislating specifically around football, in lots of different areas. And in fact, of course, I've got a bill myself which will be having its committee stage on May the 8th, which is the unauthorised entry to football matches a bill, which I hope with widespread support it has will make its way into law if we get time before a general election is called. So there is a long record of football-specific legislation, so it's not that unusual. And of course, football just plays such a huge part in our culture. And as a Member of Parliament representing Cardiff West, I know we often talk about the English football pyramid, but of course that does include Welsh clubs and historically has done so for well over a century. And football is a huge part of our culture in Wales. In fact, a lot of honourable members won't know it is the most popular sport in Wales, more popular even than rugby, and that's been helped greatly by the success of our Welsh men's national football team in recent years, including reaching the semi-final of the Euros. But of course, we wouldn't be legislating, as honourable members have pointed out, if football had demonstrated the ability to regulate itself, which many of us have called upon it to do for many, many years, including the late Alan Keane, who I'm glad got a mention from the Honourable Lady in her speech. And it's telling that this bill is actually now widely welcomed across football in almost all of its tiers, except as has been mentioned in the perhaps the Vanarama National League, but also the higher echelons of the Premier League. And I completely acknowledge that the Premier League is not only the world's most successful club competition, but its existence has also brought benefit down the football pyramid. In the first 25 years of its existence, Premier League's existence, revenues in the second, third and fourth tiers grew more than tenfold after it was created, but revenues in the Premier League grew 30-fold in that period of time. And that's really, in a sense, the nub of the issue. Without effective redistributive methods, there is an inevitable consequence, if we go on as we are, that the gap between the top and the lower tiers will gradually make the pyramid untenable and unworkable. And without a long-term viable pyramid, football at the top will become even more of a cartel than it currently is. And I would remind the Premier League and its chief executive that he told the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee earlier this year that he was, and I quote, totally accepting of the bill and the regulator coming in after that bill. So I think as the bill progresses, we should bear that comment in mind. He said that on the record to the Select Committee, and we should hold the Premier League to that. Football should be about competition, obviously, and we've heard about that during the course of the debate. Business should be about competition, and regulation is about helping to promote fair competition. That is the role of Parliament and the role of government and the role of the state in this sphere. And in the absence of an agreement between the Premier League and the English Football League, the backstop power of the regulator is an essential tool to ensure that fair competition can remain possible, and that smaller businesses are not ultimately wiped out by the gradual concentration of resources at the top of the game and the impossibility of making progress in the game without taking the sorts of risks which undermine local clubs ultimately have led to a number of the situations we've heard about with other football clubs. And I don't see how ministers are going to be able to convince honourable and right honourable members that you can do that without the regulator having any powers to deal with pyramid payments and the issue of pyramid payments, because as we've heard in the government's own white paper, they acknowledge the distorting impact that has on competition, and if this bill's about fair competition, then I believe that has to be dealt with. I do want to mention my own club of Cardiff City. Honourable members wouldn't expect anyone not to mention their own club, whose stadium's located in my Cardiff West constituency and whose recent history actually has contributed some of the clauses in this bill, particularly around fans' rights. I don't want everyone simply to dwell on that point. Cardiff City have been very successful during my 23 years in Parliament. They've been in the Premier League twice. They reached the FA Cup final. They lost on penalties in the League Cup final to Liverpool, so they've had a great success. But as is well known, some years ago, a new owner, Vincent Tan, decided to change the club's colours from the traditional blue to red, believing it to be a colour that brought good fortune. And as you can imagine, for a football club universally known as the Bluebirds, the switch to red was somewhat problematic, so I put it that way, for the fans of the football club. And I welcome both the fact that eventually that decision was overturned by the owner and he changed his mind, but also that this bill would not allow this sort of thing to happen in future without the involvement of the fans. And I can confirm that Cardiff City Football Club welcome this bill, and I want to thank Steve Borley, who's a director of the club and who wrote to me about the bill and said the game's fractured governance model and the inequitable distribution of finances is increasingly putting the game at risk. And I think that's why this bill is so important. I want to mention also that the bill doesn't pay any reference or make any reference to the players. And I think that is a missing part of the bill. And the Professional Footballers Association and the Players Union have written to honourable members about that and said that it is a shame that footballers are not mentioned in the bill at all. They've said, as drafted, there's currently no reference to players within the bill, and we think this is a significant omission. So I'd like to hear why that is the case from ministers and whether they would consider some of those representations from the Players Union to make sure that there are appropriate references to them in the bill, and also reassurances about some of the existing structures which protect the rights of players, which they're concerned about. No one here wants to damage the Premier League. I simply want my club, Cardiff City, to have a fair chance of playing in the Premier League again, and I hope that this bill will go some way, hopefully improved, strengthened and amended, to ensure we have a healthier future for football.
Yeah.